Hi, I'm Ivan, and this is IT Challenge 4 of Chapter 5, Visual Basic 2010. Challenge 4 is basically a form which asks you to find the hotel occupancy rate and the total amount of visitors in the hotel. So it says that Sorry. Where is this? I just had it right here. Oh, okay, there it is, sorry. El Grande Hotel has 8 floors and 30 rooms. And so what I did with my program was first you start the program by clicking complete report, and then it's going to pop up 8 input boxes, and in each input box you type in how many rooms are occupied on that floor. So for example, let me run the program real quick. 12, 12, 12, and then each time you enter a number into the input box, it's going to update the list box with the loop, which says which floor you're on, how many rooms are occupied on that floor, and how the percent the occupancy rate for that floor. So let me just finish. And when you're done typing in all 8 floors,
do it again, but use different numbers.
Yeah, sure.
So that we can see these percentages changing, right?
24, 13, 12.
Yeah, there you go.
30.
0.
0. 12. And then at the end you have a total rooms occupied and the overall occupancy rate, which is basically exactly that. It's how many rooms are occupied and what the percent of the hotel which is full. So you have a clear button right here which clears the form. So let's go to the code. Let's see.
Start at the beginning.
I have variables dim. I've dim variables floor, sum, and input as integers in
You did that outside any of the subroutines.
Exactly, in the general module, I believe.
Right.
And so I can use it in various command buttons. So then, here we go. I dimmed count and floor locally within CMD complete, which was kind of a redundancy. But
yeah. Wait. Scroll up. Why do you have floor declared in the class form 1, and then you have a different? That's a different variable, even though they're called the same name.
Yeah, that's just my fault. I mean, that's sloppy programming. I apologize.
Correct.
So then, I don't know if you noticed that the problem has certain criteria. It has 8 floors and 30 rooms per floor. So the first thing I did was build like a safeguard mechanism to ensure that you're entering the value within the criteria. So I used all the work is within a loop, and what that loop does, if it calculates if it's an integer and it stores it in the value floor. So I'm dealing with floor right now, and sorry, no, I'm dealing with input, which is try parse. So it's going to try parse whatever's in the first input box, which will be stored on the value input right here. And there's a second condition to that. And if input is greater than or equal to 0 or less than or equal to 30. So within 0 and 30.
Okay, so you this is a way to it protects your data.
Let me show you an example first. Let's see. Let's start one. Let's say I have -1 rooms occupied. -1. It's gonna display an error message.
Yeah.
Error. You don't meet the criteria.
It catches any exceptions.
Exactly. Or 31, for example. You see?
Okay, good.
So, just to ensure that they're using the program correctly.
That's actually something, gentlemen, that you should do always, to try to safeguard the integrity of the data that you're entering. Make sure that if there's a limit to what the person can enter, make sure that you catch it. And the way he has it is with that compound conditional statement inside of the try parse method. Okay, so not only does it have to be between 0 and 30, it's got to be an integer between 0 and 30,
Yeah.
and it can't be anything else but an integer between 0 and 30.
Yeah, it's just a way to foolproof your program.
Yeah, good.
So,
very good.
then what that does is it adds the amount of rooms occupied on that floor, which floor starts out as 1 and input is what you entered in the input box. So then it adds a list box item with that information, and the occupancy rate, I use the function format percent, and then input, which is the number of rooms occupied divided by 30, which is the total amount of rooms.
Yeah, so
and then
it
that
takes
that
that-
formats your number real nice with like a percent and a 2.
Yeah,
to the
it
100
takes
decimal
that quotient, and it turns it into a decimal, then it multiplies by 100. It truncates anything to the right of the decimal, right?
Right.
It turns it into a percent.
Sorry, to the 100th. With
Oh,
the
okay.
decimal to the 100th.
So
yeah.
32.75%.
Exactly, two spaces.
I wonder why you need after the spaces, because you can't have like 75 1/100th of a room occupied, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're right, but it's just. It's just the way that's okay. It's just the way that function is formatted, and I felt that was good enough.
No. Again, this is outstanding, Ivan, and you did a magnificent job. This is just for future reference, okay?
Yeah, sure.
A perfect example, if a person is dealing with money, you want to make sure that you format it to currency, right?
Right.
But not only that, you want to make sure you format it to the currency of the country that you're dealing with the currency,
Even
instead
better.
of euros, dollars, or what have you. So these are just things you want to think about for future reference.
Okay. So moving on to the loop. I could have used the for next loop, but I encountered some problems during the code. So this is basically what a for next loop does, but I added in the counter right here, which it would have done automatically. So what it's doing is it's asking for another input, which in which you enter the amount of rooms occupied. So there's a floor is 1, isn't it? So here, exactly, floor plus 1. So it increments the floor number each iteration of the loop, and then it stores that what you entered in the input box as input. So then after you input that, it adds another list box item with all your information, and then it updates the sum. And so the sum is whatever it was before plus what you entered during that iteration of the loop. And that's used to calculate the total.
How do you start on the first floor? You have floor set to 1, right?
Right.
But then you go inside the loop, and then you increment floor by 1. So how do you do things for the first floor instead of the second floor?
Well, because this one goes before. This one's
Okay, so
This one is
that's
the-
outside the loop.
yes, that is outside
You
the
see?
loop. So that's why I had to increment it inside the loop.
Yeah, otherwise, if you had started at floor equals 0,
Yeah.
even though there is no 0 floor, right? But if you had started at floor equals 0, you would have had to put that if statement inside of the loop.
Yeah, I just found it easier to work around it this way.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So I just
That's fine.
updated my code to fit that.
That's fine.
So it increments the floor plus 1 and increments the counter. So after this plays 7 times, 8 including the if statement outside, it's going to calculate the total rooms and then the overall occupancy rate. So since I'm displaying this in a label, I found it easier to just convert it to string, just to avoid any problems with like changing data types into a label, which is the same thing. I mean, it doesn't change the number. And then the TXT overall.
I have a question here.
Sorry, Kevin.
Since the floor and counter do exactly the same thing, can you replace the counter with floor?
Sorry.
Because both of them are adding 1,
Mm-hmm.
and so every single time they'll be the same number.
No, because when you get into this loop, floor is 1 and count is 0.
Oh, okay.
Just the way I made it. I could have eliminated count and then changed the conditional statement, but found it less confusing for me to work this way.
Yeah, I don't understand, Kevin, what you said.
I understand what you're saying. He meant like instead of having 2 different variables like for counting, because the floor is counting for floor and counting and count is counting as the counter. He's saying couldn't you combine them? But in Ivan's case he couldn't have, because he already had started counting for floor before he entered the loop, and then he started counting for the counter after he entered the loop while the floor had already started.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of like the same thing when you're doing a formula. Well, what happens if you use an extra set of parentheses? Nothing? It's always a problem if you use fewer parentheses. It's always a problem if you use fewer counters. But if you have an extra counter, it's not gonna do anything.
Okay,
Does that make
I
sense?
was just curious.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, guys.
And so for the last little piece, TXT overall, I used the function format percent again, but this time divided by 240 because it's 30 rooms times 8 floors,
Right.
which is 240, and that should give you the percentage. And then remember, this is all in an if statement. So if if the value entered in input box doesn't meet the conditional statement, then it'll just bypass all of this code right here, and it'll revert to message box error. So that's what you get. And then the command clear just empties all the text boxes and clears the list box. And then you have the done button, which is just
Okay, start, I clicked
close.
run button.
Mhm.
Okay, this is a very, very good program, Ivan. Like, the only thing I could picture later on, is making sure that this becomes part of a bigger program. Like, not only would you be interested in the occupancy rate for every floor, but later on, maybe, discuss the prices of the rooms, things like that. So I can picture this becoming a bigger program
Yeah.
that would end up helping someone like in hospitality or. Okay. Go back to the code. Any questions, folks? Questions or comments about the code? Questions or comments? Okay,
So,
John?
just really quickly, I think when it comes to the error message, you should make it so it says, because if they put in a negative number, it technically follows the criteria you mentioned in the message box, which is max rooms per floor is 30. You should make it so it says the minimum floors or the number of floors has to be a positive number as well. Because I mean, when you're
Right.
typing a -1, it's still technically under the maximum.
Right. You don't want to leave anything to like common sense or
Yeah.
just make it like completely foolproof. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, Alt P.